It was really embarrassing the last couple of years watching the Chargers flunk the NFLPA player report cards, but the good news is the bolt has paid off in a big way, and the Chargers aced the report cards in 2025.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 9 seasons together, but this is our 7th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen today. To make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Well, Daniel, the NFLPA came out with their annual grades, asking questions to all the players, and this year the grades look a lot better. Yeah. Who would have thought a multi-$100-million facility would change the way that the players think about their workplace? And it absolutely had a tremendous impact. One of the things that was a little bit surprising, though, was that Coach Harbaugh was rated a little bit lower than I think a lot of people is going to expect, but he did bring on a rock star in Ben Herbert, and he had a big part to play in how much the players love their training room and how much they're getting out of it.
Absolutely. I think that there's a lot of places that the Chargers were just never going to get better at until the bowl opened up, but I think it even goes further than that, and I think it goes to Joe Ortiz, the general manager's point, where he says Chargers are a destination now, right? Between what they have on the field and now the facilities and all of that they have to work with off of the field, they are a true destination, and I think you have to just start with how much better it was than last season. The Chargers and the NFLPA report cards that gets into the treatment of families, the facilities, the locker room, how good the food the Chargers players are getting is, the travel, all of those things. Last year, they were near the bottom. Last year, they were 30th, which is about as bad as it could be. I think they actually improved maybe even from the 2023 report cards. But this year, they ranked 5th, which I think is just a huge leap from where they were. And although the bowl had a lot to do with the Chargers' grades skyrocketing this year, they actually improved every single grade from last year to this year. And some of those have nothing to do with the bowl when it comes to, head coaching position. The treatment of families is a part of it as well. Your actual strength coaches, which they did a lot better at this year, and we're going to get to all of that. But the biggest jumps were the food, the facilities, the locker room. All of those things were just way, way better. And I think also the other part that stood out to me was just the belief in the ownership, right? Like, that has a lot to do with not just the bowl, but also the Chargers going and spending big money on a head coach in Jim Harbaugh and how that paid dividends, and the players responded to that. Last year, they got a C as far as their ownership group and how much they believed the ownership wanted to win. This year, they get an A. Owner Dean Spanos' average rating for perceived willingness to invest in new facilities, 9.6 out of 10, obviously. But the players feel that Spanos significantly contributes to a positive team culture, and also that he's extremely committed to building a competitive team, which ranks 10th out of 32 NFL owners, which is kind of crazy that extremely committed, that it only ranks 10th in the NFL. But David, it does feel like with what they did with Harbaugh, with the new bowl, all of that stuff, the players believe in the direction of this team now.
Yeah, and I think the fans believe in the direction of the team as well, because they can see the investment that was made on the field and off the field and how it is paying major and clear and obvious dividends to not only the success last year, but the intention of having future success as well. So, and you couldn't do anything but go up after you fire your general manager, fire your head coach, and really have to completely change the way that you kind of attack running your football team, which is what Dean Spanos and the Spanos family did when they went out and did something out of the norm, which is signing a established veteran winning head coach in Jim Harbaugh. And, they had already made the investment for the Bolts. They were just waiting for that to get finished and waiting for that, to actually open the doors. But all of that, with the philosophy and the money that they put on the field and off the field, obviously paid great dividends to the players, and the better results came as not only on the field, but on the report card as well.
Definitely. And they are a destination, and it's hard to kind of quantify how much more a free agent would potentially want to pick the Chargers now because of the facilities and the report card specifically. But the good news is it doesn't hurt now. And before, there's just no way to look at it and be like, if I was a free agent and it was close between one place or the other, I'm not going to pick the 30th ranked team that doesn't believe in their ownership, that doesn't believe in their head coach, that doesn't believe they're getting enough training or have the room to do any of these things. That makes a difference, I think. And I think a big part of it was the bowl. And we knew it, Dave. Yeah. We just said, hold on. These are going to be much better grades last year when we saw them because of how much was just specifically the bad facilities and the temporary situation that they had last year. The bowl made a huge difference. They went from F to A- in the food and dining category, which before it was like, come on, man. Like, you're ranked 32nd in food freshness. Like, that's unacceptable. Yeah. And things like that, the food, how much space they have. They're now, they ranked 32nd in food taste and freshness. They also went from they ranked 5th in players having an individual nutrition plan. They ranked 11th in the nutrition last season. They're just across the board. They made a lot of improvements, but now the players actually have food they like, right? They have enough space for everyone to eat in the cafeteria at the same time. And I think that especially with Ben Herbert, we kind of knew every player is going to have some sort of kind of nutritional goals, and that's a big thing for him. But yeah, just having that, right? Having a locker room they feel good about. The locker room went from an F grade to an A grade. Like, the Bolt is top of the line, one of the best in the business, and that paid huge dividends this year.
State of the art from every asset. This right here, one of the things I remember talking about when we did this show last year was controlling your controllables. And, no matter where you're at, what facility you're at, food and food freshness is something that shouldn't even be a question. No matter where you're at. But it is good to know that Wolfgang Puck and his program definitely made some very positive changes in conjunction with partnering with Ben Herbert because you talked about the nutrition. 96% of players reported that they get an individual nutrition plan, ranking 5th out of 32, which is fantastic. And I think we kind of knew that. We knew Ben Herbert's a superstar, and we knew that he was going to get the most out of every single aspect of getting the most out of these players, because that's what he majors in. And it's definitely showed in what the players said that they received. So great food, great place to do their job. And yeah, when you talk about, wanting to go play somewhere, you want somewhere that the ownership is bought in with their investment and that they feel like they can go get that 1% better that they're always aspiring to get when you have the best of the best. And that is what the Bolt provides.
And the other thing is just being able to treat your players who are recovering from injuries. That was another thing that drove me insane last year. Last year, 16% of the players felt like they didn't have enough one-on-one treatment. I think you just assume all those things are taken care of and that everyone's getting the treatment they need. And that wasn't the case. But this year, David, they have the facilities. They have enough physical therapists. They have a lot of those things they were missing, which feels like it does have a very tangible on-field impact.
Oh, absolutely it does. And you saw it with the amount of players that were getting injured, going on IR, but coming back and being able to be productive. And just the sheer number of people who didn't go on IR, I think that's a direct reflection of what this training staff was able to do and accomplish this year, partnering with these players and getting them the absolute best treatment that they can with the facilities. That is a huge edge. And we saw it because no matter how talented any individual player is, if you can't get back on the field, then it doesn't matter how incredibly talented you are.
Yeah, 100%. And last year, right, they ranked 26th in how much they thought their training staff was actually helping them and contributing to their success. This year, they ranked 6th. It's used. This is a weapon now, right? Yes. This is a weapon. Specifically in how the training staff contributes to their success, they feel like their training staff is helping them on the field. And that is somewhere where you can tangibly say, hey, this was hurting them. They didn't have enough cold tubs last year to fit everyone. They are so much in better shape now than they were last year. And those are the spots that you feel like, hey, this is actually really important to how they're playing on the field. But one thing that was surprising is that Jim Harbaugh ranked 22nd in the head coaching rankings. And I think it was a pretty hilarious reason why. So we're going to talk about that and the Ben Herbert effect on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. All right, David, let's continue getting into these NFL Players Association report cards after the Chargers got flamboyed. They just absolutely just totally
flame-broiled. Yeah.
Flame-broiled. Yeah, whatever the word is. Like, they got crushed and had been getting crushed the last couple of seasons. But this year, it was much better. And like I said, in every single aspect, they improved. There wasn't a single letter grade they got in 2024 that was better than the one they got in 2025. But it was still very interesting to see one of the places where they ranked below average, and that was their head coach ranking, right? And that was pretty interesting. They get a B+, which doesn't sound bad from his players, but that ranked 22nd in the NFL. And we'll talk about it a little bit, but the main reason was 55% of the Chargers players felt their head coach, Jim Harbaugh, is efficient with their time, which ranked 32 out of 32. And maybe some people think like, oh no, maybe that's a bad sign. I honestly just thought it was funny because it feels like the most on-brand thing for me in the world. For the guy who's giving all the Harbaughisms and kind of meandering around and using a very unconventional approach to how he connects with his players, that would be the place where he would lose points.
It's really funny to me. I mean, you got to know who Jim Harbaugh is and kind of how eccentric he is in nature. He is 100% authentically himself. And yeah, one of those things is Jim Harbaugh likes to talk. Okay. He likes to hear himself speak, which is understandable. But hey, he also commands that respect when he does say something because he's been able to create cultures and win football games and turn programs around every single place that he's been to. So if some of these players, which I'm thinking maybe some of these younger players who are not used to a head coach, maybe, rambling a little bit, might not be used to the Jim Harbaugh style, but one thing they will get used to is winning because that is what Jim Harbaugh does.
Yeah, and it also said, the players that felt that Harbaugh is moderately receptive to locker room feedback from the locker room, ranking him 26 out of 32 head coaches in the league. I'm really not worried about it. And another reason is because there's a lot of one-year contracts on this team, right? And also, you're talking about a culture that needed a complete rebuild. Like, they had to tear the culture down to the roots and rebuild it. And the part of that is there's a lot of players that are brought in by a former regime that was maybe a little bit more lax, right? Maybe it wasn't as committed, and maybe that, they're not used to that kind of commitment that it takes to double your win total from one year to the next. And maybe that's not super surprising that not everybody would be on board with how much harder that is. But I'll tell you one thing, as far as, Jim Harbaugh being efficient with the players' time, 96% of players last year under Brandon Staley thought he was being efficient with their time. How did that work out?
Not very well.
Not very well at all. So for someone who's as unconventional as Jim Harbaugh is, it's going to rub some people the wrong way. But I wouldn't read too much into this specifically because I think when you have a total culture rebuild, there's going to be some pushback a little bit, and maybe that's where he slides. And I just think that when you listen to how the players talk about Jim Harbaugh and also kind of some of the things that came out after the fact about Brandon Staley in that locker room seems as together as I've seen it under any of the Chargers coaches since we started this show.
That's
so I wouldn't, and I just think that you can't really fake the way that people talk about him. I mean, the players aren't going to come out and bash their head coach openly.
And with reverence.
It doesn't, help them to bash him, but they don't have to talk about him as glowingly as they do. And you can just kind of see a little twinkle in their eye when they talk about Jim Harbaugh because he is also the head guy, right? He's not who most of these players are dealing with on a day-to-day basis as far as, individual specific game plans and things like that. He's a different kind of head coach, but I'll take that grade all day when you see the kind of improvements this team has made under Jim Harbaugh. But another thing that I wanted to talk about is the Ben Herbert effect, which was definitely very noticeable as far as where this team ranked with their strength coaches. They ranked with an A, 5th in the league in their strength coaches this year, which was a huge, gigantic improvement over where they were last year. And I think, part of it probably is not just Ben Herbert, but having an A+ weight room after having, by their report card, a D+ weight room in 2024. But this is one of the places the Chargers upgraded the absolute most. And there's no doubt in my mind that the Ben Herbert program is already starting to work, and I think will improve even more now that he has a full offseason to work with these players.
I mean, hey, you got to think about Ben Herbert going to the Bolt being like a kid in the candy shop saying, oh my goodness, I have everything that I possibly could ever want to try to maximize the potential of all these players. And they really spoke to it on this survey. The players feel that their strength coaches significantly contributed to their overall success, a ranking of 4th out of 32 teams. That's why you go get a Ben Herbert. That's why you give him the money and bring him. And, really it was like a non-negotiable for Coach Harbaugh. It was like, hey, if I'm coming over here, not only am I taking Jesse Minter, but I got to have Ben Herbert as well. Ben Herbert is his miracle maker, and now he has all of the facilities, all of the training staff, all of the equipment to be able to maximize these players, and the players are acknowledging it.
Yeah, and we've seen it in their weight room, right? Like your grades and where you were at with everything is getting shown up compared to the rest of the guys. It said 96% of the players report they got an individual training plan from their strength coaching staff. That's something that he's done since his Michigan years. But the one thing he had at Michigan, and the thing that impressed me the most, was where players started with him as freshmen and how far along they were as juniors.
Yeah.
And by the time they got to take the field, and for a team in Michigan as a powerhouse that didn't really have the national recruiting classes that some of the other powerhouses did, they had to make the most with what they had. And the people that stayed in that program and were committed to it came out much better players and came out not only, playing much better than they would have otherwise, but playing the brand of football this team wants to be, which is we're going to be stronger than you. We're going to be more physical than you. And when the fourth quarter comes, you're going to be the team that's tired while we're just getting started. And I think this year we saw that more than ever with this team. And I think it's only going to get better because now they're out of those temporary facilities. And I think that now, they've talked about it before. Jim Harbaugh said, hey, the season might not start until March officially, but that place is open for all you guys for the entire offseason. Make sure to go get the most out of it. And then the places they can still improve: team travel, the treatment of the facility or the families. The treatment of the families bothers me. It did improve a lot. Last year it was an F. This year it gets bumped up to a C. So it's getting better. Last year the biggest complaint was players having to pay for childcare when they bring their child with them. And there was a very unusual practice at the NFL level when these teams are making as much as they are. That I didn't see any mention of this year. So it seems like maybe that was something they fixed. The other part of it was the most common player request is to help their families secure parking passes for home games. I know how much that pink lot costs. It can be hard to park at SoFi Stadium, but the least the team could do, and maybe something that gets brought to light to the team now because of a report card to this, let's take care of the players, right? Let's take care of their families and make sure they can park at these home games. That doesn't seem like too much to ask, and I think this is something that'll get fixed.
I agree 100%. This is such a small, trivial thing in my mind as far as an easy, quick fix. It's like, hey, any and all family members that want to go to a home game, all of that stuff should be predetermined the week before. All of it should be signed up for, and they should get those passes issued out. They should have an allotment specifically for the players and their families. Just get it done. I mean, it's something that seems so simple, and I expect that it will get done. That's a really, really easy fix, and it should make a significant difference.
And usually, as we saw with some of these grades, like having it pointed out, having it kind of brought to life can force change, which I think what this is all about. And it's also about this entire list being able to help players who might not be able to have friends on other teams. They can kind of reference how the situation is somewhere to give them a full scope of what's going on over there. And that's why I feel like it's so helpful. The Chargers also ranked 25th in overall team travel, 27th in efficiency. Maybe get a new plane, Dean. Maybe we need a new jet, a new
That's
PJ
the next
for these
investment,
boys,
man.
Yeah, for sure. But they've come a long way, and like I said, every single grade was better in 2025 than it was in 2024. I think that's huge because they are a destination now, and this is just one less thing that could be a detractor from potential free agents wanting to come join what the Chargers have going on. But since we had the report cards coming out today, we're switching things up a little bit for segment 3 because we had so many great buyer sells for Tuesday's show. We wanted to get into a little kind of rapid fire of some ones that got left out and shout you guys out for some really good buyer sells. So we're getting into all that more, including if we think the Chargers are going to make 2 big-time moves in the offseason, whether in free agency, maybe a trade. We're talking big-time moves. We're getting into all that and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. All right, David. Well, we did want to do something a little different since we had an extra segment. We wanted to get to some of the buyer sells we weren't able to get to on Tuesday's show. And since Tomorrow is not going to be Fan Mail Friday because we have a very special guest interview. We have Alex Insdorf, who is going to be a lot of fun as we ask him kind of how he feels about some of the latest rumors going around. Is there any receiver he would trade for? Is he on the Devontae Adams hype train like we are? And so much more. But thank you guys, as always, for making us your first listen today. For your second listen, make sure to check out Locked On NFL Draft. 'Tis the season with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. Now that the season is over, get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts from. So, David, a little bonus buy or sell. I guess we did bonus for the Chargers Unleashed crossover too. So lots of buy or sell this week. We know you guys love the buy or sell. This one is from Minner Bets, who says buy or sell. The Chargers will be the most aggressive team this free agency season, acquiring 2-star players. Are you buying or selling that?
So I'm going to buy the fact that I believe they will get at least 2-star players. I do feel like the Chargers are in the market for that. Because they see that the obvious deficiencies that they have. And also, like, a star player doesn't mean it's a wide receiver or a tight end. A star player could be a fantastic guard or a center.
Yeah,
as well.
I mean, I think that's not a star to most people, though. I mean, this one's specifically about 2 stars in free agency, because we've seen people out there that are like, well, what if you get a Devontae Adams and you bring back a Keenan Allen, right? Or you make, pay a running back or one of those things. This one's specifically about free agency.
I can see 1-star defensive player and I can see 1-star offensive player. I am however, going to sell the fact that they're going to be the most aggressive in free agency. I think the team that's going to be the most aggressive in free agency to me is going to be the New England Patriots. They have a quarterback that's on a rookie contract. They have $120 million in cap space. They have a lot of holes to fill. They got issues on offensive line, weapons on the outside, defense all over the place. I think they are going to go on a major shopping spree.
Well, I mean, that's interesting. I mean, them signing 2-star players. I think star is the hard word here, right? Because it's like, I don't think of offensive linemen as stars. I don't think Chargers players, or Chargers fans, I should say, are looking at, and maybe Trey Smith gets that, but like, I don't think Trey Smith is a star in Kansas City when you're talking about how they've won so many Super Bowls. Right. You're going to go a long ways before you get to Trey Smith's name. I don't think that they're going to sign 2-star players, and I don't think there's a ton of star player potential that's out there, right? T. Higgins probably off the table, maybe some stars on the defensive side, but it's not really a hugely star-ridden class of free agents, which if you're the Chargers, might not be the worst thing, because when the Chargers have been the most aggressive team in free agency, it hasn't happened. The last year,
it hasn't worked out.
2019, the J.C. Jackson year, right, or in 2021, the Chargers had all this cap space. They went and they used it. They made the big splash signing, and not a lot of those deals worked out. So I don't think that a Tiger and Joe Ortiz is going to change his stripes too much. I don't think that he likes to be a huge spender in free agency. Then again, the Chargers could have $100 million in cap space depending on who they cut. So maybe they will go and try to acquire big names and multiple big names. But I think that's where Chris Saiz comes in here, where he says buy or sell. The Chargers should add at least 2 premium players, be free agency or a trade. So that opens things up a little bit. I don't think they're going to sign 2 big players, but I do think the Chargers could look around on the trade market. I still don't know if I'd say 2. I would say they're going to get 1. I would buy 1. I'm still going to sell 2 top of the market guys, because I could see them going and, signing for a Devontae Adams or trading for a DK Metcalf and then pairing that with some reasonable kind of mid-level deals and surrounding the team with that. Plus, I also think that your own free agents are going to eat into this number. It seems like a big number right now, but as Joe Ortiz talked about in his NFL Combine press conference, they're trying to re-sign a lot of their guys, and some of those guys aren't going to be cheap, and that's a lot of spots that they have to fill. So 2 premium players, I think it could happen. I would buy 1 right now, though.
I can understand that. I can understand that. However, obviously, I said that they're going to go get 2, so I have to stick with that. I do feel like, but I think, maybe free agency is a little bit difficult to be able to acquire that. However, I still think that a trade can be made. I mean, as much as
premium players aren't the same as stars either, right?
Yeah.
Like a premium player, like Trey Smith is a premium player. There's premium guards, there's premium defensive tackles out there, there's premium edge rushers, and I do think there is much more of a chance that you could go 1 and 1 via free agency and 1 in the trade, more likely than him making 2 gigantic deals in free agency that would potentially harm their comp pick formula and stuff like that going forward too.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a fair point. And I'm still on the DK Metcalf train. I want to see that deal get made. I want to see the Chargers go out and just solve that that
I
problem.
think you just want to figure it out
emphatically.
going into the draft, right? Like, you
Yeah,
don't
I want to
go into
figure
the
it
draft
out.
feeling
Just-
like you haven't improved his weapons at all. Like, that would feel pretty bad.
You can't. You just absolutely can't. So I want to see one premium offensive lineman, Trey Smith, come on down and then go out and go get DK Metcalf. Go make that trade.
Yeah, I
If
can
you
see
do
that.
that and you accomplish that in free agency, I'm feeling so much better about what the Chargers are going to do and what they can do in the draft, because they're not going to be pigeonholed to be able to have to go one direction or the other.
Yeah, and let's get to this next one from SoCal Underdogs, who says, buy or sell, the Chargers will spend more money on upgrading the defense compared to the offense in free agency. This one's interesting because, to me, I'm going to sell it because I think it's more likely that they address their biggest needs in free agency and potentially, right, you get a Devontae Adams and you pay one of the top guards, right? Or you go get a DK Metcalf potentially and pay him and then still try to upgrade the interior of the offensive line in free agency too. I think that it's more likely to me that they spend more money on offense in free agency and then use the draft to add to the defense in the draft and add to the offense in free agency.
I'm going to agree with you. I am also going to buy the fact that they're going to spend more money on offense. So I'm going to sell that they're going to spend more on defense because I feel a lot better about the defense. The defense just came off of, a number one scoring defense in the NFL type of season. Like Jesse Minter's the real deal. I mean, he did a great job of maximizing all of the elements that he had available to him. And so I feel like it's more just complementing and supplementing on that side. There needs to be some major overhauling happening on the offensive side, and I would prefer it to be established plug-and-play players that are ready to go. And obviously, you're not going to find that for the most part in the draft because they just haven't played in the league. So getting guys that can come in, already has that proven track record of success at the NFL level, I want that on offense, and I want that for my quarterback, Justin Herbert.
Yeah, I just think that there's too many positions on offense for you to wait for the draft and think you're going to come away with, as many impact players or a top flight weapon for Justin Herbert. Like, I'm sure there are some guys in the draft that could help Justin Herbert right away from a weapon standpoint and adding firepower to the offense. But then you've also, if you don't do in free agency, you feel like you have to use pick 22 on that, right? Or use pick 22 on a guard. If you fill both your guard spots in free agency and feel like you have good players or at least good options there, you don't go into the draft feeling like you have to reach for one of those guys potentially just because you can't send out the same group that you did last year, because especially on the interior, we know how bad it was. So I think that the Chargers will spend more money on offense free agency, and then maybe we will see something where they focus more on the defense. And if it is a stronger defensive class, that's probably what they should do early on. But let's get to this one here from Big Daddy E along the same lines with the offensive line at least. Buy or sell, Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt will be the only returning starters in the O-line next year. So, before the news this week, I stayed pretty consistent that it might be unrealistic for them to replace all three of those guys, and I felt like Zion Johnson would probably still be the left guard, and then maybe they upgrade at center and right guard. I'm as close to buying this now, David, as I have been, because now with the Zion Johnson news, that tells me it might come down to Zion Johnson winning a competition for the starting center position for whether or not this comes true. It tells me that they're definitely focused on potentially, unless they want to bring back Trey Pipkins, which I don't see, replacing both of the guards and potentially even the center after even hearing that, hey, Zion Johnson could be an option at center. That tells me you have two new guard spots and a center spot that you're trying to fill. So this could actually happen.
Yeah, I mean, and it probably should happen. To be quite honest,
I think we all would have said that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you feel great about Rashawn and Joe Alt because they're fantastic players, but the interior of the offensive line was a problem from the first game to the last game, where the Chargers got embarrassed on the interior with those stunts and twists and having Justin have to run for his life. That was really a byproduct of the poor play of the interior. So I would love it, honestly. If they're able to get three quality players to really overhaul and change and improve and solidify the middle of that offensive line, then I would be all for it. Now, with that being said, it's extremely difficult to replace three starters on your offensive line in one offseason. Rome was not built in a day, and most of the time, an offensive line is not built in one season or one offseason. So I'm going to buy it, because I feel like it's something they need to do, but I know it's going to be extremely difficult.
Yeah, and I mean, Zion Johnson could be the starting center. Who knows? I just think that if you went into this season with any of those guys as option A for you
Yeah,
without
it
very
just
strong
can't be.
competition, like you have to unequivocally, no matter what, two of those spots, if you want to be a different team, if you want to make a deeper run, if you want to be more competent offensively and have less droughts, two out of the three of what was
Minimum.
one of, if not the worst interior offensive lines in the league last year has to be changed because you need those guys playing at a much, much higher level. And then you even saw in the Super Bowl with Patrick Mahomes, those will get exploited. You can
Yeah.
potentially hide one guy. I think now with what we've heard about Zion Johnson, there's a good chance this could happen. I don't necessarily think that I would, stamp it right now and say this will happen, but I think right now I'm as close to buying that as I've been all off season, which I think is good news for the Chargers. But that's going to wrap things up for today's show. Make sure you guys are back here tomorrow because we have another special guest. We are bringing on Bolt Breakdowns, Alex Ensdorf, also contributor for Bolt Beat. Make sure you guys are here for that interview. It's going to be a lot of fun. And to make sure you don't miss it, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from, as well as finding the show every single day on all of our social media at Locked On LAC on Twitter, at Locked On Chargers on Instagram, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. You can also find the show every day on our own individual accounts. You can find me at Dan Talk Sports and David Drogemeyer at Dro Talk SD. But the offseason of interviews continues. Make sure you guys are back here tomorrow for a special Friday show with Alex Ensdorf. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.